Well, hello and welcome, everyone. We are so glad you're joining us for this episode of Premier Power Events Podcast. Now, Angelie, I never did a good job naming this because that is a mouthful. I have to slow
It
down
is. It's a
every
lot of
time.
peas. It's a lot of peas.
Oh, goodness. It makes me think about the pandemic and wearing a mask, but we're not going to talk about
Yes.
that
No,
today.
let's not talk about that.
We have such a great program for you today, friends. You are going to meet an incredible lady who has been in my life more than I realized because we have both started our careers and did different vocations for a while and worked hand in hand in that. And she knew me and I knew her, but then we both went a different direction and have our puzzle pieces have fallen together, as Melita says.
Yes,
And
yes.
we are here to share that really good news with you. But Angelique, you have been so passionate with coming into my company and with this hope for the helpers. And I know that all our friends have seen your logo and your freebie that you've been giving away, which has been so helpful for me and my family because we've had some need for help.
Mhm.
But I know you're going to give us an amazing opportunity to even get a little deeper with you. So tell me more about what's going on and welcome my good friend.
Yes. So I'm Angelee Murray, as Curtis said, and just super excited to share with all the people out there that are dealing with addiction.
Mm,
Substance use disorder. There's all sorts of names for it. The clinical word is substance use disorder. The everyday language, tagline is, you are addicted, or you have a family member that's addicted. It may be you, it may be someone you love, it may be a coworker, it may be a neighbor, it may be an aunt, an uncle, it may be your pastor at church.
mhm,
But we all have someone in our lives, if not some people in our lives that we know that are dealing with drug dependence that has led to a full blown addiction. And that's where I come in here with Hope for the Helpers. Um, 20 years ago, I found recovery from my own addiction. I was addicted to pain pills. And at that time, it only lasts for about 2.5 years. But I was also in my other career where I knew Curtis said, before, very successful. No one knew this was happening to me. I was doing all the things and, climbing the ladder of success and being on stage and all that. But I was fighting a battle that was internal and one that was silent and one that was hidden and one that carried lots of shame and lots of guilt. Um, and there I was. And so when I came on the other side of that, I decided, you know what? I think that I may want to do something in that field. And I did. I let that career sort of fizzle out, started a new one, and I have been working with individuals and families that have been affected by substance use disorder in some way or another, and helping them navigate life. That's the big thing. Navigate life because now life has a new normal. And how do we get from point A to point B? And there's lots and lots of questions from family members.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am one of those family members.
Mhm.
We've had this in my family. My daughter Hollis is doing great today, but we had a huge season, and we're at the tail end of that season,
Yay.
and it's just so overwhelming. Just the simple words they use, just like you said. There's four ways to say you're addicted. And even reframe. One or two of your videos that I watched was reframing your language and watching your language to be in a supportive manner. Well, you didn't
Right.
test dirty or you didn't test clean, that's
Yeah.
like.
Mhm.
And then when I thought about it, I was like, "Oh, I bet that's just awful. That is just awful to say."
Well, like Oprah says, you do better when you know better. I think that's how she puts it. you know.
You're right. You're right. And so you gave me those resources for me to use. So I'm so grateful that you now have these resources packed up, ready to give everyone else.
Yes, and when I was fighting my own battle, no one knew about it. My family didn't even know. I was there in my home, and my husband worked out of town lots, and so he really didn't. He knew something was maybe off, or but he really didn't understand the whole deal about what was happening with me, and what I was dealing with as far as needing to have that substance in my body in order to get up, in order to move, in order to take a shower, in order to be productive.
Sure.
And then I became, I started to sleep all the time. And then that was a whole nother thing. Okay, well, what the world's happening here? But what happens is when individuals are addicted to a substance, they eventually start to run out of that substance and they have to, like for me, it all came from Walgreens. I went to the Walgreens, and I had my prescription and I got it and I left. But at some point in that time frame, my pills were running out
Mm.
quicker than I could get a prescription. And so I thought to myself, what am I going to do? And where am I going to go? And how can I get more? Because I knew without that in my being that I had no energy, I had no confidence, I had no this, I had no that. And then after a while, it became where my body was so used to it that I would shake without it. And you've seen people that alcoholics that without alcohol they shake, and it's the same thing with any type of substance that you use. um, but what I found when I started a nonprofit to help women in this situation,
Mhm.
what I found is that the family members are the ones that are set, they are left sitting somewhere thinking, what's happening to my child or what's happening to my husband or my wife or my friend, and how do I help them? And they've lost their job. This may not, I hope it doesn't get to this point, but many times
Sure.
it does get to a person's situation where they've lost their job and they may have lost their home. They may have you know burnt all the bridges with their family members and friends, and they've lost trust with people. And so now that family member or friend is thinking, okay, what do I say? How can I help without enabling my person? How can I support them without making them feel guilty and like it was their fault? How can I love them without doing everything for them?
Oh,
So
you're saying all the words that I had to navigate through, and it was just so challenging on your own to know the language and to trust yourself enough to give them $20 to go to the store, that they wouldn't use
yeah,
that $20 for a bad thing, or every time there was a change in their habit, once we did get through and are testing on the great side of like, okay, there was a different phone or there was a different device, or that charger shouldn't have charged that device. You
yeah,
just you watch yourself just go down this rabbit hole, and you have nothing that says, because you're thrown in a courtroom or in a therapy session with people that I've done this
yeah,
so long, it's first nature to them, and I'm clueless. I am just lost in this labyrinth, so I was so grateful that I had your resources to reach out to you, for you to hold my hand, literally, figuratively, and say, "Okay, what's your first question? What's your second
mhm.
question? Let's take a deep breath before we do anything." So it was just so nice for you to be in that place for me, and it's so nice that we can give that resource to others.
Right. Addiction is categorized by the American Medical Association as a disease, a chronic relapsing disease. So this is not a moral, anything to do with a person's moral compass. This does not mean they are a bad person, that they are doing something that is, you know, offbeat, bad. This is not something that a person should feel shame or guilt about. The first time you use something, yes, that's your choice, probably, and it's not always. I have found, but the first time you use something is usually a choice. But after that, if you have that addictive personality and that chemical makeup in your body that grabs a hold of that and says, "Oh, this is what we need in order to live. This is what we need in order to survive," and if you do, then it's no longer a choice. A switch is flipped in your brain. It's a chronic relapsing brain disease. A switch is flipped in your brain, and now you have to have this in order to reward that reward system in your brain. And that reward system is what makes you go and makes you move and makes you productive. So, you know, all those things are really hard concepts for most families to understand because they are so much sitting in guilt and shame that what did I do to cause this in my partner? What did I do that caused this in, my son or in, my friend? How did I let this happen? I should have seen this coming. Um, so we deal with all of that, and then we start, families deal with all the lies, and because that person's trying to put on a front because they don't want to be where they are, but they have no idea which way to turn. And so, I understand it from both sides, from being that individual and now helping families. I see both sides of the coin, and It's really, really difficult, and no one should have to do it alone. No one should have to do it alone.
No, no, and I had to emphasize your point, I had to think, like, I have had high blood pressure, and I've had high blood pressure since I was in the 4th grade. That's not gonna change. That's how God made my body,
Right.
and
Mhm. Yeah.
this, like you said, don't don't let me misquote you, but disorder, it is classified as a disorder,
Yes. Mhm.
and so you
It's a
can't.
disease. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, disease. I
Mhm.
knew I was gonna do it wrong.
Yep.
It's a disease, like having diabetes or having high blood pressure.
Yes.
It's not my fault. That's not the way, it's just the way your body was made and the way it is, and we just get to deal with it, how and move through, and you get to support us during this process as the helpers out there. So, I know you're gonna be doing some coursework, you're gonna be doing some classes for us. I know you're not gonna tell us what's in the classes because, that's why we're with you, but who are these classes for exactly? I know I, as a parent, would have them, but I found it was hardest for I'm not putting words in your mouth here, hopefully.
Sure. Mhm.
But for me, with Hollis, my daughter, who was, 15, 16, at the time, her friends are my biggest challenge right now of how to like, she is not the same person 30 days ago as she is now
Yeah.
because 30 days in a treatment program really the second time,
Mhm.
flip that switch to her to that's behind me.
Yeah. And there's so many things that I have been asked over the past 15 years from people that know my story and know that yes, I'm very open about, yes, I went through active addiction for 2.5 years and now I'm an advocate for those, suffering with it and those that are supportive of that person. Um, so I get lots of questions, and some of the questions are things like, um, how do I support without enabling? We've talked about that.
Right. Right.
Some of the other questions I get are, what is the language? We've talked about that. What do all these terms mean? I want to help my person find treatment, but I have no idea of what I hear things like partial hospitalization. I hear intensive outpatient. I hear residential treatment. I hear, what do all these things mean? I mean,
And then put the court system on top of that, heaven
yes,
forbid we have
yes,
to appear in a scary courtroom where we've had to go through a metal detector
yes,
and people are,
yes.
like, drinking their soda pop and making jokes, and you're like, "I've
Yeah,
never been in this building.
yeah.
I'm
And
having an
see,
attack."
and the first thing I did when I, came out of active addiction is I started a nonprofit, and that nonprofit led me to going inside of a jail system and doing classes with inmates, with female inmates. And so that was so scary to me. And I had to learn all of these things because I've never been arrested. I've never gone to jail, but I am advocating for the people that end up there because I knew myself that could be me. That could have been me,
Right,
one more step and that was where I was headed.
right,
So I had to, learn all the jargon and, all of that kind of, the criminal court system and all the things that person has to go through and probation versus parole and prison versus jail and what's the difference in all these things. And now they want this person I'm working with to go to, sober living house. Well, there's a million different kinds. There's called sober living, they're called transitional homes, they're called residential systems. I mean, they're called a million things. And
yeah,
I mean, if you've never been in these worlds, how would you know that? And I'm so grateful that I didn't get to quite that point where my family members had to step in and sort of help me run my life for a little bit,
right,
but that happens quite often, and many people end up there, and they have the family members and the friends that are trying to help have no idea what to do to help that person. So, back to your question, who is this for? It's really for both sides of the coin. It can be for the
correct,
person who is in active addiction, but it can also be for the family member, the friend, the coworker, the supportive person that's trying to help them. Both sides can learn from my courses. They're probably geared a little bit more towards the person that's supporting
yes,
the individual with the disease of addiction, but that person and that family also goes through a lot of mental health situations themselves, and they go through a lot of ups and downs, and they go through a lot of things where they have to learn to take care of themselves too. And so I talk a lot about just, positive things that they can do during the day, during the week to keep themselves sort of on track while they're helping someone else because you can't pour from an empty cup. We've all heard
Mm.
that.
Girlfriend, preach. Yes, ma'am. You cannot. You
I could talk
cannot.
for forever, but yeah.
Yes, yes. No, I wholeheartedly agree with you there because I was given I got a text message because, Hollis is at the end of her, court process and come to family therapy at the farm. And I went, "What are you talking about?" And it's a horse farm that they do therapy with our entire family.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how this helps." And I was given this huge packet to fill out with no explanation. And I like had to call you and say, "What do I do? I don't
Why
understand."
am I going to see horses, and what does this have to do with addiction?
Right, right, right. But
I
luckily
don't I just want my child to do better and be better.
so much, so much. So you were able to guide me through that, and your resources are incredible because you again have said, like you said so many times during this interview, you've been on both sides, and
Mhm.
that just makes it there's no one that can describe it until they've been on the negative side. I mean, I love everything about someone who is supportive. I promise you that. I'm not against that at all, but just knowing you know what it feels like because I've reached out at some of those low times and been like, "I can't breathe." And you're like, "Okay, that's our first step. Let's take a
Mhm.
deep breath together. Okay, have you eaten today? Have you taken a drink of water? Have you walked outside?" Like you would help me because sometimes the supporters get in the same habits that it's
The
easy.
supporters absolutely get in the same habits, and many times they start to mimic some of the behaviors that their person. I'm not saying this is you, but I'm just saying I see this in families that sometimes they start to mimic their because everything is so negative. It's just so negative, at that time with that person, and some of that negativity sort of rubs off on the family members and the friends. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about how to sort of get you back, right side up so that you can be that positive source for your person. And, the other thing is, we talked about housing, we mentioned treatment, we mentioned the court systems and all of that, but there's also just a way to be a light for
Mhm.
your person and let them watch you, and how that you navigate life. And most families do a great job at that, but sometimes it's generational. I see addiction go from, one generation to another, and many times family members sometimes just don't have the skills to start with of just, some of those things that they want to pass on to their loved ones. And so I do share some of those tips. Many tips that I've learned from my other career
Yes.
are so wonderful and so needed in everyday life.
Yeah, we don't come out of the womb just knowing these things. We have
No,
to
we don't.
them, and then if we've learned them the wrong way, the fun part is we can unlearn them and
Yes.
understand why we need to head in the other direction, and it was the mirroring the behaviors,
Mhm.
Angelie, I wanna go back to that for just a second because there was a point where, Meredith, Hollis's mother, and I were separated way before this happened, and of course, she blamed it on everything, but that's not what we're talking about, but there was a point where I had to block her in my phone just
Mhm.
because her behavior to me, and I knew it was not to me, I knew it was the situation, I was like, this is not healthy for me to be in this right now, and you're not healthy," and she knew that, she had fully admitted that, but that 2 or 3 week season was just, we all need to just move for
Yes.
take a break for just a
Yeah.
second. It was so hard.
There's times when, and let me say this first and foremost, I'm not a clinician and I'm not a doctor. I'm not a licensed counselor. I'm not a licensed physician. And so anything that I say, would never take the place of a true licensed counselor and, a physician or medical professional. And I'm not trying to be any of those things. I am here just to give real life lived experience from both sides, the active addiction side and the professional side, working alongside addiction
Mhm.
professionals. So I don't want anyone to ever take what I say as medical advice.
Right.
But there's all of these times when you really have to just look at yourself and say, okay, I've got this person in my life that I absolutely love and I want to do everything for. And then I've got my own life. And sometimes you have to separate yourself from that person so that you can function, you know? Um, and that's and it's not a bad thing that you have to separate from the person that is going through it. Sometimes you have to do that, in order to get yourself in a good place.
Right.
So, we talk about that kind of stuff too. So
Yeah. Well,
it's a really hard situation for people, but it works.
it
It
does.
works.
It does.
Yes.
I'm one of your early students, and I will be your best student because the other thing is it doesn't end. With every one of our sayings in our household now is situations,
Mhm.
places, and people bring up
Yeah.
those new emotion or those
Mhm.
old emotions. If you're in I didn't realize it, but when I rented this new house in Owensboro, it's 2 doors down from where a lot of things happen. And so
Yeah.
we really had to rebuild this is dad's house, and that is not that house, and,
Yes.
the good boundaries there. So I just am so grateful for you to have these resources that we can go through, I can go through, I can have my daughter sit beside me and watch so that we'll learn together. So, Angela, I'm ecstatic about all this coming out, and I'm sure you'll be back to tell us much more about it, but
I will, and again, I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to share with
mhm,
people that feel like they've never had anywhere to turn to, and felt like making a phone call to this place or that place was really just too much for them, and they can sit in the quiet of their own home privately or in their car at lunch and listen and watch and
yes.
decide what to do with the information. That's the big thing is that now you have hope. You have somebody that's giving you hope that it can change.
Well, I think that what your comment that you just made and a memory from when we started was sometimes, you started addiction, didn't tell anybody. And
Mhm.
sometimes me, I'm in front of a crowd of 900 people and I just don't want to put that in front of the microphone and
Absolutely.
make my Facebook post. So having this resource, like you said, that you could watch on your phone, watch on your phone at lunch, or,
Yeah.
something very privately that you can work through on your own is an amazing
Mhm.
resource for someone that's been through it. Because sometimes clinicians are in and out, and sometimes therapists, stop at the 51-minute mark, but we're gonna be here for
Yes.
you. We're gonna be that
Yes.
resource. We're gonna have a great community, and I'm gonna be your number 1 fan, so I cannot
Well,
wait.
thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to, meeting people and hearing what they have to say.
It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome. Well, we will wrap up for today. Before we leave, tell us where the best place to find you online is so we can sign up and get all your great resources and
Yep.
know everything's happening.
First, to could just go to, the website, www.hopeforthehelpers.com. That's hope with the number 4, hopeforthehelpers.com,
Love it.
and you can click there and get a free resource guide to get you started on all the things.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Absolutely. You can also find me on Facebook at Hope for the Helpers, and then on TikTok, Hope for the Helpers. Yep.
Oh, I spend way too much time on TikTok, so where I'll find you at first. Okay, friend.
Okay, great.
We will sign off on this episode. We will see you shortly with the next one, and thank you, Angelie, for being our honored
Thank you,
guest today.
Curtis.
So
You're the
grateful to
best.
have you in our resources. So we'll see you next time, friends.